I'm presenting here to argue for the case for bringing back the railway that was torn up 50 years ago, connecting Oxford, Eynsham, Witney and Carterton. This would cut journey times by 70%, connecting Oxford with Eynsham in roughly 11 minutes, with Witney in 16 minutes and Carterton in 22 minutes. And I have worked for the last 4 years with many, many parties who I'm deeply grateful for all the help that they have contributed. And that includes the County Council, Oxfordshire County Council, the District Council in West Oxfordshire, Town Councils in Witney and Carterton, Parish Councils in Eynsham, the RAF, various landowners and developers including Grosvenor at the Salt Cross Garden Village, England's economic heartland, and the list goes on and on. The reason why I put so much blood, sweat, tears and toil into this is because we've got two huge problems in West Oxfordshire, and there are probably others as well, but two big ones here are transport and housing. And they are two sides of the same coin, in my view. In transport, we have a corridor, the A40 corridor, which links Oxford and points east with Cheltenham and Gloucester and points west. And we have Oxford City at the centre of that web, which is one of the kind of strongest growing cities in the country, which is putting enormous pressure on Oxfordshire. And to the west, we have some of the worst served infrastructure in the whole county. We have got no material railway station, no major railway station apart from Hamborough, which is really very small and one train an hour, just a few miles of dual carriageway, and yet we have got enormous housing coming into the district. Yes, I'd be delighted to.
Thank you, Sir Mark, and thank my honourable friend, congratulate him on securing this debate. Would he agree with me that the miseries experienced by my constituents in Eynsham and Cassington as they travel on the A40 each day will only be made worse by the new housing developments unless we find a way of alleviating that pressure, and that the railway, on which he has done so much to campaign, is one important solution, along with improving the road, that will make those journeys much easier and open up the opportunities to the west of Oxford?
Thank you, and I very much concur. So just to quantify that housing and the scale of what's going on now. So since 2000, we have had nearly a quarter more, the population of Oxfordshire has increased by a quarter. In the 2018 local plan, we were signed up for 16,000 homes over the period of the local plan through to 2031. And quantify that, that's a quarter of all new, increasing our housing stock by a quarter in just 10 years. On top of that, as per the new NPPF, 62% increase on our current local plan. And we have got, moving over to the transport side of things, we have got a road which is under very severe pressure. Some of you might have spent time on the A40, probably more time than you would like. But what we have got there is an extremely constrained corridor, which is, according to ACOM's 2021 study, it's going to be 30 minutes slower by 2031. That's 7 years away. That's 30 minutes slower between Witney and Oxford by 2031. And that is with the disastrous bus lane project being completed, which is not going to be completed because there isn't sufficient money. That was something, I'm afraid, the last administration, Conservative administration, signed up for £180 million for 4 miles of bus lane, which has turned into 2 miles of bus lane and a park and ride. Not a good investment. So what we need is a long-term transport policy. What that will deliver for us is a number of things. We would have journey times cut by up to 70%. We would have a plan for our housing because, like me, many constituencies in our constituency actually support housing. We all recognise that people need somewhere to live, and we want to be grown-ups at the table coming up with a solution rather than scattering those houses willy-nilly around the district with no coherent plan because there isn't a plan because we don't have a transport solution. So what we support is putting those houses that we will have to take anyway around the railway stations, and just as our Victorian forebears did many decades ago, is using those houses to fund the railway. So that would solve housing. Then it would solve the economy. So our economy in West Oxfordshire really suffers. You would have thought we'd have lots of good employers coming into West Oxfordshire because we're only 10 miles west of Oxford. We don't. There are some good employers, but very few now come into it because they know that the transport is completely unsustainable. The concept is very logical. You've got Oxford with its fantastic best universities in the world over there, and you've got places like Witney and Carterton, which have got excellent skills, particularly in the aerospace and aviation sector because of the RAF Bryce Norton. And the opportunity to connect those two with a fast, reliable transport corridor would allow people to locate businesses into West Oxfordshire, which would mean that people would have to commute out less and jam up our roads less. So that's a really big opportunity. Environmentally, I'd be delighted to.
Thank you, Sir Mark, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend for giving way, because railway connectivity is also fundamental for my constituency of Wokingham. Heathrow is a rarity among international airports. Large parts of its catchment simply don't have any direct rail access. We need a western rail link to Heathrow. It will reduce CO2 emissions equivalent to 30 million fewer road miles every year. Does my honourable friend agree that rail is crucial for decarbonisation?
Well, very well said, and I very much agree. And following on from that, so transport is one of the hardest nuts to crack in that decarbonisation agenda. And without a large-scale mass public transport solution, we're not going to get there. And that is absolutely at the core of Oxfordshire County Council's strategy, and this will help deliver it, just as your project will too there. Two more points. Socially, so there are a vast amount of people living in West Oxfordshire who have to get themselves to the hospitals in Oxford for secondary care and tertiary care. The unreliability of that road puts enormous stress on their lives, and often they're having to go backwards and forwards a number of times a week, including members of my family as it happens, and that means that people have to leave home for a 10-mile journey, sometimes 2 or 3 hours in advance, because they're so scared about missing their appointment, and that is only set to get worse on current plans. Finally, defence. RAF Bryce Norton is the biggest RAF base in the country or internationally. 7,500 people work on that base. That base was built there because it had a railway connection. That railway connection was ripped up 50 years ago. So bringing that railway connection back now, in times of peace, that's bad news. In times of war, that's truly terrible. Is that really how we want to run our country? That our biggest air base in the country, which runs all of our international transport, doesn't even have a railway connection? Disaster. So, what's been going on to date? I give real thanks to the Witney Oxford Transport Group, who really took the charge on this in 2014 before I showed up. And I'm immensely grateful for them making me the chair in 2020. Since 2020, we have conducted a number of technical studies, particularly around defining a route, both all the way from Oxford through to Carterton, but also through the Saltcross Garden Village. That gave the County Council enough comfort to commission a feasibility study, which was published last November, and this year Lichfield is currently carrying out an economic analysis. And this is all working towards the new local plan for West Oxfordshire, which is being worked up now, and I'm working very closely with my district council colleagues. I am a district councillor, and with the land use and planning Silk of the Year, Sasha White, many thanks Sasha, to work in the railway line into our local plan, because if it's in there, then we have a real chance of getting this railway built. Now, I used to work in business, and I understand that there's really one thing that counts here, and that's money. So a key part of the work we've been doing here is working on the funding, and shaking a tin at Treasury and waiting 50 years is not what we have in mind. So we have been working with is E-Rail so far, who have just funded 30% of the Ashington to Blythe line by going up to the landowners and developers along that track and saying, if you want to bring back a passenger rail line here, sign some voluntary, legally binding contribution agreements which will allow you to be building houses around those future railway stations. And by doing that, the reasons why you should sign up for that is bluntly because you'll make more money. And you'll make more money for three reasons. One is the local plan there will allow you to have houses sited around that railway station which wouldn't exist. Secondly, around a railway station you can build at higher density. And thirdly, each of those houses is worth more because it's next to a railway station. That might sound radical. That's what our Victorian forebears did 150 years ago. It's what Japan, Korea and Hong Kong do. It's what much of Northern Europe does. And that is how we fund our how they fund their public infrastructure. And what I would argue the case, and Labour does sometimes mention land value, I really hope that Labour looks into that, because that is a way of using private and public funding to get things moving quickly, as opposed to just sticking it to the taxpayer, which is what we've had to do up to now. So I'd really ask for your help to explore that. That will fund somewhere around 50% of the railway line. The other half will come from Homes England. And what we will be doing is we will be delivering on our side of the bargain of getting all those houses into West Oxford in a coherent and sensible way. Because without a railway solution, we will not have that solution, and we will have an unsustainable long-term problem. Thank you very much.